So what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to take the Savage Worlds core rulebook and then you mold it towards what best works with the setting you are trying to portray. The core rulebook gives you some ideas about it, and at this point there's a lot of other products you can just look at and see what did they change, what did they add, what did they remove to make it work. And that is how Savage Worlds is supposed to be used. It's not truly a generic system. It's more like, this is the baseline, and then we're going to give you some ideas of how you can mold that so it portrays what you actually want it to be.
Hi, welcome to the Dieku podcast. I'm Gary Snow, and with me is Manuel Sambs. Now, Manuel's done some really great work with the Sprawlrunners game. It's a platinum bestseller on DriveThru RPG and has won awards from the Pinnacle Entertainment Group as far as their swag program goes. And it's a really neat, interesting product, and I'm really hoping to dig into it today. And Manuel, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. Great pleasure to be here. Hi, Dieku Games fans. So lovely of you to listen to me. Well,
and Manuel, you're contacting us through Germany today, right? So where are you in Germany?
Yeah, born and raised German. I live in Munich currently and have basically all my life, although I was actually raised slightly outside of Munich, what Americans would probably call the metropolitan area of it.
So what was
that
it like?
is, for everybody who doesn't know Munich, that is southern Germany in the state of Bavaria. Oktoberfest. Now you know.
And I was there when I was 21 or so. I not for Oktoberfest, but I was in Munich, beautiful city, and you got the cuckoo clock. So it's quite beautiful.
Funny enough, the cuckoo clock is not a German invention. That is actually Swiss.
Okay, cool. Well, you guys may have improved upon it. And what are you drinking today?
The whiskey of the night is a 10-year-old Benromach. That is a Speyside single malt Scotch.
Nice. And that's no product placement here. You're not sponsored by
None
it.
at all. If he gets paid for my product placement, I hope I get my share.
Cool. So how was it growing up in Germany as far as role-playing games, and like how did you get into it, and what kind of community is there?
It's a lot different than what people expect if you're talking to, for example, an American, because if you're talking to an American about role-playing games, they're like, oh yeah, I played D&D in high school. And D&D did not exist in Germany when I grew up. You could go out to very specialized shops and purchase it, but it had no market dominance over here whatsoever. What we did have was Das Schwarze Auge, which exists in an English version. It's called The Dark Eye over there. And then a long drought of nothing. And then there was Shadowrun and the World of Darkness products. And my point of entry to the role-playing game market was Shadowrun. I think it was about 14 or something. That must have been 94 or 95. And a friend of mine from school ask around like, hey, I've got this cool book and it's a game and it's kind of collaborative and we do cool stuff and you get to blow up shit. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear here.
Sure.
So yeah, and we were like, me and a few friends were like, oh yeah, cool, that sounds interesting. So what do we do? And that was the Shadowrun 2nd edition core rulebook. And from there, it just snowballed into, oh, you are the guy who has great ideas. So why don't you stop playing and start running games? So basically a year later, I had become, even if I didn't know it back then, the forever GM.
And so what kind of drew you to that? Like, do you like the creative process of like being the GM and like inventing the stories and the adventures for people to go through? Like and how did that lead into you starting to design games?
That has changed over the years. In the beginning, it was just having friends. I was kind of an outsider back in school, and just having a close circle of friends with a shared commonality, like a like a pen and paper game, something to get together and have fun with. That was really all the motivation I needed. So back then, I literally ran everything by the book and from the book. And it took years to evolve from that into designing my own campaigns, running my own missions in Shadowrun, and not going from stuff that was in the books, trying other role-playing games. I think that took like 4 or 5 years before I actually played in a game of Germany's biggest and best-selling role-playing game, The Dark Eye. And from there, I just spiraled into trying everything because I got really, really curious. I had started with Shadowrun, and The Dark Eye has a very different rule system. I was like, oh, wow, this is super different. So let's see how other games do it. And there was some really interesting stuff that I played, including the Man in Black role-playing game. There is an officially licensed Man in Black the movie role-playing game, which is really funny. It has tables for gear you can throw together. You then have to test in the field, and you won't know what it does until you pull the trigger or push the button. Super funny ideas. And from there, it kind of gradually shifted me into a more creative approach towards role-playing games. But me actually making stuff for the public didn't happen until 2010 something. Like my biggest achievement, Sprawlrunners, which we're going to talk about later, stemmed from a Shadowrun conversion that I did way back in the day. And that one wasn't even meant for publication. That was just something I made for a close group of friends who played role-playing games together. And we got a bit bored and fed up with the power creep and gear porn of the traditional Shadowrun system. And at that point, I had discovered Savage Worlds through another friend. I was like, this is flexible enough. So let's just see what happens if I try to make Shadowrun work with this. So that is what then became the now kind of infamous Savage Shadowrun 2nd edition.
And when you started in the process of choosing Savage Worlds as the system, like, just sell us on Savage Worlds. Like, I think it's an underappreciated system. I mean, it obviously has its fans, but sometimes I think people just go, oh, it's a generic system and whatever. But just sell us on that. Tell people why they should be checking it out a little bit more.
Okay, so I came to Savage Worlds. That was basically coincidence. And I'm super happy that it happened, because ever since then, Savage Worlds has been my go-to system. I'm still playing and trying other systems, but every time I do, I find myself in situations where I think we could have been done with all of this 10 minutes ago if we just used Savage Worlds, and we would have had the same amount of role-playing and the same amount of fun, even or possibly even more fun, because the mechanics wouldn't be in the way or wouldn't drag it out so much. So yeah, as you already said, a lot of people just look at Savage Worlds as a generic system. That is actually kind of incorrect. The way Clint Black, the line developer of Savage Worlds, says, it's a core system. So what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to take the Savage Worlds core rulebook, and then you mold it towards what best works with the setting you are trying to portray. The core rulebook gives you some ideas about it, and at this point there's a lot of other products you can just look at and see what did they change, what did they add, what did they remove to make it work. And that is how Savage Worlds is supposed to be used. It's not truly a generic system. It's more like, this is the baseline, and then we're going to give you some ideas of how you can mold that so it portrays what you actually want it to be. And they've done that in a way that is so incredibly flexible that you can make it run everything. There are people in the Savage Worlds community, and they are not wrong. Let me just say that. Let's say you can run everything with the Savage Worlds core rulebook. I agree, that is true. But I also say, you are going to rob yourself of the potential of Savage Worlds if you do that. It is meant to be expanded upon. And because the core systems are so incredibly flexible and easy to modify, and because there's a huge community of very, very creative and helpful people out there that help you in that process, it's really, really easy to adapt it to really anything from classic high power fantasy to some dark, grim and gritty fantasy to modern games, to like slightly advanced modern games or modern superpowers games. Like there's stuff like Titan Effect, which is, if you know the TV show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., you could portray that with using Titan Effect, but you would be robbing yourself of playing Titan Effect. Check it out. It's awesome. I'm not getting paid for pitching that, but it's one of my favorite settings for the system, and it just shows what great things you can do by molding the core book, and in the case of Titan Effect, the Superpowers Companion, to the setting you want to portray. And from there you can go to opera sci-fi, or technically even hard sci-fi. I've seen people run hard sci-fi settings with Savage Worlds because the rules allow you to portray even stuff like gravity or loss of oxygen. It's a bit of a mind flip for most people because they are used to huge books giving them tables and tables and tables of modifiers for each given situation. And that is the exact opposite of what Savage Worlds does. Savage Worlds gives you core mechanics that apply to situations. And all you need to do is pick the right subsystem for the situation at hand, and everything else falls into place from that, because you need very little modifiers of like penalties and bonuses. What little there is, you can build yourself through edges and hindrances. So there is a bit of an invest if you want to run your own setting. If you don't have a pre-made book, then yes, you are going to have to sit down, understand the core systems to adapt them to what you do. So it is not as always as easy as just picking up the book and running it, which is possible, but you won't be getting the full potential Savage Worlds has to offer. And once you accept that it is very different from how other systems behave, and let it flow and let it unfold to work its magic, to use a little prose, then you will discover just how insanely good the system can be. And granted, that doesn't work for everyone. There are people that enjoy the GURPS approach with very, very minute details for everything, and that's perfectly fine. But I believe a lot of people just shy away from it because they think it's a generic system and therefore think it's kind of boring because it wants to cater to everything. And Savage Worlds doesn't want to cater to everything. It gives you the potential to run everything. And I believe that is a huge difference and the single most biggest strength the system has.
And the for those that don't know, there's the Suede edition, which is the Savage World Adventure edition, and that's their most recent version of it. And then it's got basically the core rules, and they've got some other versions for superheroes and I think fantasy. They have another edition, so there's other add-ons to that. But the core rules are in the Suede. Now, when you started in to do Sprawlrunners, how did you approach the what do you leave in, what do you leave out, and like how cumbersome of that process was it for the edges and hindrances and that kind of thing? What process did you go through internally to figure that out?
That's a loaded question because, well, Sprawlrunners didn't start out as Sprawlrunners, so I may be taking away to a point you wanted to get to a bit later, but otherwise I can't answer the question. Sprawlrunners started out as a Shadowrun conversion, or rather a companion, as I called it. Well, no, that's not true. It started out as a conversion. Back when it started, I just called it Savage Shadowrun because it wasn't meant for publication. So I just needed a snazzy title for our group, and it was abysmal. It was horrible. It was one of the worst things in my design career that I have ever written, and I am so happy that no copies of that exist anymore. The most recent version, or the most earliest version of it I could recover from somewhere was version 0.0, and I know that I started at 0.1. And 0.1 was a Moloch of translated systems that were just taken one-to-one from Shadowrun and mashed into Savage Worlds. And that is one of the biggest mistakes you can make when transferring anything into Savage Worlds or building something in Savage Worlds. Like, there is a saying in the Savage Worlds creator community, and that is translate the setting, not the rules. And that is what I did at first. I translated the rules, and it was absolutely horrible. It was like, I think, 90 pages just full of, this is how you do the exact thing you are doing in Shadowrun, but by rolling Savage Worlds dice, which is absolutely horrible because it doesn't help. It doesn't support. It just tells you how to roll different dice. And it took me about a year, I think, a year and a half, and some contact with other creators, that I realized how bad that product was that I had made. And from there, I started to rework it. I'm like, okay, let me get this closer to Savage Worlds, until I realized everything in here has to go. And then I started with an absolute blank slate, and this was back in the Savage Worlds Deluxe times, where the core rulebook wasn't as good with explaining on how to use the systems. It made a lot of assumptions, and Suede is ways better in doing that. So I needed a bit of outside help back there, and that helped me to take a look not at the Shadowrun system, but at the Shadowrun setting. Extract from there, how does the world work in Shadowrun? Okay, so it behaves in a certain way. What systems in Savage Worlds can I use in a specific way to model that? And that means that meant that some things I just left out because they made sense in Shadowrun, but they didn't make sense or weren't fun to use in Savage Worlds. If you know both Shadowrun and Savage Worlds, then now you will be able to follow me. If not, I apologize. In Shadowrun, you summon spirits, and then depending on how many successes you roll, they owe you services, which is something I just flat removed from my conversion. And back then is when I started calling it a companion, because it wasn't a conversion anymore. It was an adaptation of the Shadowrun world and setting into Savage Worlds, but it had only very loose connections to the actual rules. So in my companion was like, okay, yeah, you summon a spirit, and as per the summon ally power of Savage Worlds, that means it stays for a certain duration. And because I was using an optional rule, which are called setting rules in Savage Worlds, which is one of the major points, you can dial stuff up and down in your specific setting or introduce unique effects. I was using the setting rule no power points, means there is no mana, there is no limit for certain things like maintaining spells. Like, cool. So if you summon a spirit, it's just there. And it will be there until it is either killed or dispelled, or until certain trigger things happen that I then introduced. Like that is something that I took from Shadowrun. In Shadowrun, if a shaman summons a spirit, it stays until either sunrise or sundown, whichever comes first. So that I took over, but then you had a spirit that was basically permanent without limits, because the services didn't exist. It would just keep following your orders until, well, it was killed, dispelled, or sunrise or sundown in case of a shaman spirit. So I needed something else to make it a bit less an I win button or like an absolute no-brainer. So compared to Shadowrun spirits, which are notoriously hard to kill and can wipe a group if they don't have a mage or a physical adept, the spirits in Savage Shadowrun were a lot more squishy. But then you could just summon a new one, and all it would take you was one action. So that is one example of how I changed certain things and balanced it within Savage Worlds, but tried to keep the feeling of the Shadowrun world alive.
Okay, then now it's probably maybe a good time. I'm gonna share on my screen here, Sprawlrunners, and we can just kind of maybe walk through it and just talk a little bit about it as far as, so what version of this is, like, with all the iterations, like how many years now has it been since you started it to where it is now?
I started building Savage Shadowrun in 2012, late 2012. And I released Sprawlrunners in 2019. And at the point I released it, I had been working on it as Sprawlrunners for 2 years, I believe. So the backstory of that is that Savage Shadowrun grew in capability, and I got to a point where I thought, this is a solid product and really works well with Shadowrun, works really well with the Savage World system. So maybe I should show this to some people and outside of my creator circle and see what they think. So I showed it around, and everyone was like, "Yeah, okay, I'm gonna run this for my group. I'm sold." So I was like, okay, maybe some more people would enjoy this. So I started to post it on a blog and on certain websites that had Savage Worlds creator stuff on it. And from there, it grew in popularity, and I gathered a kind of fan following, so to speak, if I wouldn't have called it that back then. And then in 2017, I was on version, I think, 0.12, because I was scared of calling it a final version. I was contacted to take it down due to licensing reasons, which was absolutely, I'm not going to call it fine because it sucked for me, but from a legal standpoint, they were absolutely correct in asking me that. But at the same time, or a bit later, I think, Savage Worlds, or rather Pinnacle, Pinnacle Entertainment Group, the people who create Savage Worlds, create and publish, came up with the Savage Worlds Adventurers Guild. So I thought, okay, I have this product that is very good at running Shadowrun. So what if I just file off the serial numbers, rework it a bit, and then publish it on the Adventurers Guild, and have a generic cyberpunk with magic supplement. And that was 2017, and from there I gathered more people that helped me, some co-writers, some people who helped me with the layout, and it took another 2 years to actually come to the point where it was in 2019 when I released it, or where it is now still, because there have not been any substantial iterations, only minor bug fixes and a few like spelling mistakes and such that we changed. Most of those 2 years I've been battling with getting it to print, and you wouldn't know it if you compared the two just from looking at them, because what you see in Sprawlrunners is a layout that was originally made by Jetty, Jan Jetma. And yeah, he did an absolute amazing job. And the original Savage Shadowrun was, well, it was a Shadowrun conversion, so it used lots of Shadowrun fan art from the official Catalyst Game Labs fan packages, which of course I couldn't reuse. So pretty much all artwork in Sprawlrunners you see is stock art, with some exceptions which are not stock art, but just free artwork, like the backgrounds for topics and the page backgrounds and such. And that was done by Jetty. And the original Savage Shadowrun had a full page background from stock art, and it had like this bluish, I'm not sure if it had a matrix theme, like the matrix number theme, but yeah, like a high-tech background. And I asked Jetty, okay, cool, I really like the optics of that, of the blue and the technical, the way that makes it look high-tech. So please keep that and do something with that. So what he then came up with was, okay, cool, we can do that, but maybe we should do something for the top and the bottom of the page to make it a bit more, have it more distinct edges, and have somewhere we can put a menu, not really a menu, that came later, but where we can put like kind of indexes so people know which chapter they're in at the moment. And I thought about that and was like, okay, cool. Can we do something else high-techy with? And Jetty actually had the idea to do the rusted metal background that we now see at the page top and page bottom, and as background for full page artwork. He was like, yeah, I mean, yeah, cool. Shadowrun or not Shadowrun is high tech, yeah, sure, but it's also, you play people who live on the streets in the gritty parts of town where it's always dirty and there's always wind blowing around trash. So maybe we should incorporate that into the layout. And then he made a few mock-ups, and the one you see in the actual book is one of those mock-ups. I was like, this looks amazing. This is contrast, and it just makes it look a lot more dirty while not sacrificing the high-tech ideas. So the whole idea of trash and chrome, he basically nailed it. And I was hooked on that. It was like, yep, cool, that is how we do it. And then we had, in the beginning, we had the chapter markers at the top, and those were just chapter markers. And then Christian, who writes and publishes Titan Effect, made a advanced version of his PDF with an interactive menu. I'm not sure if it is also at the top of the page, but it is everything in his book, in his PDF, is bookmarked. So you basically never really need to scroll. You just click around, and it was awesome. So I was like, yeah, I want that. Make that happen.
It's essentially like a website. You can click on the navigation at the top and go to those different chapters. But I stopped here on the hindrances and the edges, because I've looked into even myself. I was like, oh, maybe Savage Worlds is maybe a good system that other people could leverage. You know, it's like it's not a true SRD as far as like you still have to connect with the Pinnacle Entertainment Group to do it. But when you look at the core rules and what they put together in the Adventure Edition, the Suede Edition, and then what you're able to present, that's the part that I always found confusing, because like you're not supposed to replicate their rules, because you're not supposed to copy and paste their rules. You're supposed to use their Adventure Edition rules, but if there's differences, then you have to call them out with your setting. And so how much work or difficulty did you find to figure out what should go where and what should be left out?
Very interesting question. I actually have to think about that for a bit, because at the moment, I don't find it hard at all, but that is after a journey of 10 years to get to the point I am. So now I need to try to remember what Manuel in 2017 was thinking about that.
Well, just like as an example, like I think in the Adventure Edition, they have something similar to Jinxed, if not Jinxed itself. And so how do you go, okay, I'm going to put that in mind, and instead of just referring back to their rule book. And that's the difficulty I've found when I ever think about going, I'm going to make a Savage World setting, and it gets complicated, because I'm like, well, maybe I should not put any of their rules in. Maybe I should just strictly go with setting. But then
I'm of the opinion. I'm of the opinion. I'm a minimalist. I think the less you put in or remove, the better. But there are others with different approaches, and it works well for them. Minimalism works for me. Your example of Jinxed is actually it blurs the line, because when I started making Sprawlrunners, Savage Worlds Adventure Edition wasn't out yet. So there are some things in there that I made with only Savage Worlds Deluxe as a basis. And Jinxed incidentally, is very close to a hindrance that exists in Suede and didn't exist in Deluxe. But at the point I reworked Sprawlrunners to Suede and then released it, I had already put so much work into it, and a lot of people have had access to it for playtesting. I decided to not remove Jinxed intentionally because there were people with active groups running Sprawlrunners, and I didn't want to put anyone in a situation where they would have to rethink how their character works, even for a small portion of a minor hindrance, just because the core rulebook does something that I already had in. And mechanically, it's still different enough for that I thought it was okay in there. But if I were to write Sprawlrunners again from scratch for Savage Worlds Adventures Edition, then Jinxed as a hindrance would not exist. Because it's just, as you said, it's too similar to something that already exists in the core rulebook. And yeah, I don't like to reinvent the wheel. If there's a hindrance in the core book that does what I want, then I will just use that. I can give you another example with edges, because I use a different system that does not rely on money, but instead it's a point system, and which I was inspired to by Titan Effect. Again, I am not sponsored by Knight Errant Media, I swear. I wanted a way for the runners to have more of those points. So I could have made my own edge for that because it is not money, but Savage Worlds has edges that modify how much income and money for gear a character has, and that are the rich and filthy rich edges. So I could have made more edges and just said, yeah, ignore rich and filthy rich, use mine instead, but why bother? So I just said, yeah, cool, rich and filthy rich still exist, just ignore the rules from the core book. They work like this in this setting, because the way they work in the core rulebook doesn't make sense if you use them with the setting that doesn't use money. And that's so the process to arrive at the point where you can confidently do this it's long, it's tedious, and it's very painful, because you have, as a creator, I believe you have lots of ideas, and you want to leave your mark. You want something to feel like you made it, and you want people to read it and feel like, oh yeah, this guy absolutely poured himself into the product, and you can see that. And I feel like some creators make the mistake of thinking that has to apply to the mechanics as well. And they change way more of the mechanics than is actually needed to make their setting work.
Yeah, and I think I've heard that from a lot of the people at Pinnacle, that they've said, like, the system's been around for let's say just for 20 years or so, and that it's been play tested quite a bit, and the people know what works. And for you to come up with new edges that have not been created before or done before is probably pretty rare at this point. So there's no need to purposely try to reinvent the wheel, and actually you should take advantage of the fact that there's all these hindrances, edges, whatever the case might be, that you can already kind of use within the system, and then you can really focus on the creative part of the storytelling in the setting itself. But from an outsider's point of view, and I'm glad you answered the question, is because I saw it and I was like, I don't even know when leaves off and when starts, and how to approach it. So with that said, you're in the SWAG program, which is the Adventurers Guild program, and there's also an ACE program. And do you know the difference between them, that you could tell us which, if somebody's thinking about doing a Savage World game, what they should do?
So there's 3 iterations of publishing material for Savage Worlds that Pinnacle has official licenses for. The smallest one, so to speak, is the fan license, which allows you to publish anything you come up with, original works, based on the core rulebook, but you have to publish them for free. You can publish them anywhere you want, but you cannot charge money for it. Then there is the Adventurers Guild, where you can charge money for what you make, but you have a few more restrictions because for once you can only sell on DriveThru RPG through the Community Creator Publisher Program. Swag is a Community Creator Publisher Program. And you also mostly have to do your own material. You cannot reference anything from published Pinnacle settings, and I mean, yeah, that is kind of similar to the fan license. You could publish for other settings that are not yours if you have permission. But the main difference is, yeah, you have to publish on DriveThru RPG, but you can charge money for it. That is the Swag program, and that is how I publish my works. And then the third or highest tier is the ACE license. And ACEs are fully licensed publishers, which means they can publish whatever they publish and have the rights to do. So obviously they cannot just start publishing for established Pinnacle settings like Deadlands or something. They would have to ask permission first, of course, but ACEs generally don't do that. They have their own settings they publish, and they can just sell anywhere they want. If they sell on DriveThru RPG, they have to give a certain percentage of the sale income to Pinnacle. And if they sell outside of DriveThru RPG, they don't. They can pocket whatever they earn. So if you are an ACE licensee and you just sell only via your own website or your own web store, cool, you keep every single penny you earn, and you basically only have to be verified as an ACE licensee once, and after that you can just keep publishing. With Swag, it's technically a bit more restrictive because stuff has to be approved by Pinnacle. I am not quite sure if they actually do that or if they have a background process, or if everything just gets auto-approved after DriveThru has checked it for technical problems. I'm actually not that sure in that regard. So yeah, if you want to start out your publishing career, this is a topic where I am deviating a bit from Sprawlrunners because there's I could talk a lot about this topic alone. As a generic advice for if you want to start publishing, this doesn't apply to Savage Worlds. This applies to everything. In my opinion, you have to be known in the community before you start publishing. If you are like a big shot publisher, then cool. You can absolutely just barge into the market, throw around marketing money, and then say, "Here's this book, buy it." But that is not how most publishers operate these days, because, well, you mostly don't really get to make a living off of pen and paper products these days. So insert yourself into the community, find out how they tick, and just become a name. The reason why Sprawlrunners is, or all of my products really, are as successful as they are, in my opinion, is because I was a known quantity years before I published my first product. Because of the development of Savage Shadowrun's second edition, I delved deep into the Savage Worlds communities at that point, which then became like a bit of an inner circle of creators. Way back then, it was like 7 years ago or something. And but people saw that I was active, and I was active on the forums, I was active on the Facebook group, I was active on the unofficial Savage Worlds Discord server. And whenever anyone had problems or had an answer, had a question, then I was basically living in there. So there was a good chance they would get an answer from me, and people noticed that stuff. So they knew, okay, there's this guy who likes to help. He's super supportive. He's also the guy that if you publish something that he considers to be improvable or improve worthy, he will tell you that. And if he thinks what you published is bad, he will tear you to shreds, which is fair. I may have been a bit overly zealous in my crusade to push people towards better quality, or what I perceived as better quality. And I'm very much aware that I probably, or no, that I wasn't always right. Not just probably, I wasn't always right. I projected a lot of my ideal idea of how Savage Worlds was to be used on how I tried to help people. But I always conducted myself in at least what I perceive to be a respectful manner. And from that, I also wrote a few reviews and everything. And yeah, people just knew my name. They knew, oh yeah, Manuel, yeah, that's that guy. That's the Shadowrun guy. But they also knew, yeah, just talk to him. He does that Shadowrun thing and he knows a lot. So that is how people knew me before I even started publishing anything. And the first thing I ever published on Swag was a very small supplement called Distant Journeys, which stemmed from a discussion I had with some friends on the Savage Worlds Discord server. There is a system to simulate long overland travels in, what was it? The One Ring, which is the official Lord of the Rings role-playing game. And somebody described how it worked, and I was like, that's really cool and really neat. And that is something you can do in Savage Worlds, but some people could probably use a few pointers to see how to actually make the subsystems work and do that. So I gathered the ideas that were flowing around, and I wrote it up and made a small product out of it. It is 3 pages long. And then, of course, I got permission from everybody who contributed, because that would have been like a really rude thing. Like, hey, thanks for all of your ideas. Now I'm going to make money from it. So yeah, everybody that contributed to that is acknowledged in the PDF. And yeah, I put that up on Swag and publish and posted on the forums and on Facebook. Like, hey, I made this cool little thing, and it's usable. It's written with a bit of fantasy setting in mind, but you can probably adapt that to modern and sci-fi as well, really easily. Yeah, just check it out. Let me know what you think. It costs $1, and I sold. Hang on a second. Let me look that up.
Sure. And while you're looking that up, maybe we can just talk a little bit about the finances of it all. As far as, I think a lot of people starting into the game design world say, well, I'm going to invent the next Dungeons and Dragons, right? And I'm going to be a millionaire before you know it. And but there's a lot of people that are supplementing their like normal income through products like this, where you are able to scrape a little bit of extra, and you build up your career and build up your products over time. Is that a model that like you said, building community around you, is that a good strategy or a recommended strategy from your perspective?
I can't really comment on trying to build this as a business, because that was never my intention. So I never consulted with anyone about building an actual business. But from what I know from talking to freelancers, it's very different than what I did. If you build a business, you want to have stable income, and that means you need a different approach to publishing. You need a different approach to pricing. You need a different approach to community building. Like, I did community building where the communities already were, and just use that, because I didn't need my own place. Why would I? And if you want to build a business, then you want a way to easily reach the people that follow you and enjoy your works. And you can only do that to a very specific degree if you work in the forums or Facebook groups of other people. You want your own. Veiled Fury Entertainment didn't have a Facebook page back then because it didn't need one. Why would it? So you want your own Facebook page. You ideally want your own forums for the people who enjoy forums. You may want a mailing list, because apparently mailing lists are still a super important and mighty tool. And yeah, it's a whole different approach. So what I did was, I just wanted to make products that people enjoy. And if I could make back the money that I had to invest to purchase stock art to make it look a bit better, then that was a win in my book. So I was very, very surprised that when I released Distant Journeys in the first month, it sold 103 copies. That may not sound like much if you just throw it out as a number, but let me give you a bit of context for that. 101 sold copies, it makes you a silver bestseller on DriveThru RPG, and that means you are part of. Hang on, I need to add up some. So that's 2%. That's 5, 6, 13. That is, you are part of a group of the upper, I think, 26% of sellers on DriveThru RPG. 74% of DriveThru RPG products sell less than 101 copies. So that, from the first thing I ever published, was insane. I was just blown away. I was like, okay, cool. So that probably was kind of a fluke and won't ever happen again. And then the next month I sold 20. And I was like, that's more like it. And the next month I sold another 20. And then I sold 15, then I sold 7, and then a big bundle came, in which I put that product, and that sold a lot more. But Distant Journeys has been selling ever since. And there have been great months with around 30 copies sold. There have been not so great months with around 7 copies sold, but it still sells to this day. And it has been out since April 2019. So for me, as just somebody who just wanted to make back the money to purchase stock art, that was insane. And then I released my second product, Fast Lane Hacking, which is actually an excerpt from Sprawlrunners. I have 2 systems to model hacking in Sprawlrunners, a very fast one and one that is a bit more detailed. It plays still reasonably fast, but with a bit more flesh to it. And I saw a lot of demand in the communities for a fast hacking system. I was like, okay, I have one. It's just in this big product. So whatever, I'm just going to rip it out, package it up as its own thing. It's 2 pages, I think, slap a price tag on it, another $1, go on swag, cool. So 65 copies in the first month, 22 in the next, and then 15 and 14 and 20. And the same thing happened again. Like, it had a reasonably good initial, I mean, it had a great initial run. That was still copper bestseller in the first month, which is 51 copies or more. And from there it keeps selling. And the funny thing is, it kept selling even after I released Sprawlrunners. And on the page of not Distant Journeys, on the page of Fast Lane Hacking, it says this is a subsystem of a big book. So if you have purchased that book, you do not need it. And if you want a fast hacking system and don't care for anything else, yeah, by all means, spend the $1 and go ahead and buy it. And it keeps selling. I have had a single month since it released, also in April 2019, where I sold 0 copies of Fast Lane Hacking. That was like, okay, what the heck happened? But ever since then, it doesn't sell as much as Distant Journeys because fantasy is still the way bigger market. Like, that's another good tip. Yeah, if you want to go into pen and paper publishing for the money, publish fantasy. You are not going to make money if you publish. Modern is so, but if you go into sci-fi or cyberpunk or something, either you are cyberpunk red, or you're not going to make enough money to make a living off of it. Sprawlrunners sold an insane amount, but that has other factors that contributed to that, which are absolutely not replicable. Is that a word? For other people, I believe. I wouldn't be able to replicate that. So yeah, it was that once in a lifetime moment kind of thing.
Well, and you just kind of hit on the long tail, as they call it, with any product that you have that initial burst. But it's amazing how long sales can go on for any of these products. It can go on for years and years and years of just steady sales. And Sprawlrunners, I mean, I don't know if you're willing to share it. How many of those do you tend to sell per month right now? And it's been out since 2019.
The initials, I have to correct myself. I think it says copyright 2019 because that is when I started to actually write and circulate it. But the publishing date of Sprawlrunners was November 2020. And I don't have a problem with talking about numbers. I kind of like them. Some people may think that is bragging. So all I can say, please believe me, this is not to brag. It's just to give context and explain. In the initial month of Sprawlrunners being released, I sold 864 copies of that. And that's what I mean with that is something I will never be able to replicate, because that, to give you context for why I think that is that number is so high. One factor is I was a known quantity, but also I had been drumming up hype and support for Sprawlrunners for 2 years at that point. I had been feeding the hype train relentlessly. And also it fell into a time where Cyberpunk Red was announced, but hadn't been published yet. And Cyberpunk 2077 was drumming up insane awareness for the cyberpunk genre. So I believe the latter two are the biggest contributors to the numbers I sold with Sprawlrunners. Sprawlrunners to date is the only Savage Worlds Adventurers Guild product that ever made it into the global DriveThru RPG top 10. I made place 7 for I think 3 weeks, which even thinking back it's just insane that happened. And I firmly believe that it is a very solid product and it would have sold very well regardless, because it is great and it is what people wanted. But without the contributing factors of the Cyberpunk Red release being imminent and people just wanting Cyberpunk because of like Cyberpunk Red and Cyberpunk 2077, it wouldn't have been nearly as successful as that. So yeah, a bit of luck can carry you a long way. And to get back to the original question, Sprawlrunners has a really, really weird fluctuation in sales. It is bundled every now and then, which kind of makes it a bit hard to say because I don't track that on this sales sheet, so I don't know which of these months are when it came bundled with anything. But yeah, just with the information that I sometimes bundle it, which helps sales, which explains the ceiling. It usually sells between 30 and 90 copies per month. So yeah, that is some more fluctuation. But yeah, like last month, February, it wasn't bundled with anything, so still sold 36 copies.
Well, and that's great. And just like I said, like the long tail of any product, and who knows, like in the future, if you're going to put out a second edition of Sprawlrunners, and that might boost sales. But what are your plans for it in the future? Like, have you thought about where you'd like to do that, or are there other products that you're kind of kicking around?
That is a multifaceted question. I will start at the beginning of your sentence. Sprawlrunners second edition. I've had thoughts about Sprawlrunners second edition because I keep looking over it again and again because of actual work I do with it. And it is very noticeable that it was originally written for Savage Worlds Deluxe, if you know where to look and how to look at it. And it also shows that it was based on a product that was initially conceived when I wasn't as good a designer as I am now. And I never made a clear cut and then just rebuilt it from the ground up with the knowledge I had at that point. And I believe that shows. And I believe if I were to do a second edition, it would be, I'm not sure if I would say it would be better. It would be different. If I were to do a Sprawlrunners second edition, it would be very different than the product as it is right now, simply because with my knowledge about design increasing, my experience increasing, so also has my my approach changed to how I handle certain things. So that's why it would be a very different book in a lot of aspects. That is something I'm not currently working on because I have enough to do even without that. As I said, I've been fighting to get this to print for the past 2 years, and we are finally in the late stages of bringing it to DriveThru RPG print on demand. I have the first 2 iterations of print proofs are here. I wasn't really happy with them. So we are doing a second round. Those are in the mail. So I hope they arrive soon. And if they are more up to the quality I expect, then yeah, Sprawlrunners print on demand could be around the corner.
And
for other things, I've teased.
What was the issue that you kind of came across? Like, and just for other people, like when you got them in the mail, I'm sure you were excited to see the print on demand. And what weren't you happy with?
DriveThru RPG uses a printing company in UK called Lightning Source, and Lightning Source changed which paper they use a while ago. And the new paper has some very unique properties when it comes to ink absorption, which makes it a bit of a hassle to get the color saturation of your print files just right, so it looks good on the paper they use. And the first iteration of the print proofs had very faded colors. It was still all perfectly recognizable, but I felt like they should pop a bit more. Like, they won't ever be as pretty as they are if you print them on glossy paper, because that's just because of the paper that Lightning Source uses. But I felt like if we adjust the color profiles a bit, then it could look a bit better. Better is a subjective thing. Like, there are a ton of print-on-demand products out there, and people are perfectly happy with them. But yeah, well, I had an idea of how I wanted to look, and the first iteration wasn't it. So I talked to my layout team, and they adjusted the color profiles and talked to DriveThru RPG. So yeah, a big shout out to Meredith from DriveThru RPG for guiding us through that. And yeah, even bigger shout out to Charlotte from Irregardless, who is the amazing person doing layout for me, which is another thing that I could only do because of the success of Sprawlrunners, because, well, having layout done professionally costs a lot of money if you pay out of pocket. So because of the success of Sprawlrunners, that was a decision I could make. It was like, yeah, I have this budget now I can work with. So I need this. I needed the full layout to be redone in InDesign so I could make print files. And it was like, yep, I'm just going to hire someone to do it because I can afford it now. And that was a very, very pleasant feeling. Well, as for other things, I have hinted from the day I released Sprawlrunners, I've hinted at a follow-up product called Running the Sprawl, which would be more of a design guide, explaining my design choices in Sprawlrunners and teaching people how to use Sprawlrunners to run their own games, because this is perfectly in line with how people have a misconception about Savage Worlds being a generic system instead of a core system. Sprawlrunners is a toolkit. Sprawlrunners is not a setting. Sprawlrunners does not provide a setting. Sprawlrunners only provides mechanics. And Sprawlrunners is supposed to be used by people in, okay, we take the core rulebook and we take Sprawlrunners, and then we take both of those and mold them towards the setting we want to run with it. So if you want to play Shadowrun, you will notice there are no rules for astral space in Sprawlrunners, because I didn't agree with the concept. There is astral perception in it, but there are no rules for traveling through astral space and everything. you would have to add that on yourself, which is easy enough to do. I just didn't have it in there because I made a very conscious choice of, this is no longer Savage Shadowrun. It's now called Sprawlrunners. It's now mine. I am no longer tethered to everything that exists in Shadowrun. I can do with it what I want. And most of it I liked. But some stuff I never really enjoyed that much. And so I had the freedom to say, cool, so that's getting the boot. And Astral Space was one of those things. And a lot of people ask me, yeah, cool, so when are you going to do Wi-Fi rules for Sprawlrunners? I'm like, yep, never. Because I hate the concept and how it's done in most games and how it mostly becomes an arms race that is boring, in my opinion. A lot of people have a lot of fun with Wi-Fi and Wi-Fi hacking in their games. And yeah, cool. Get Sprawlrunners, get the core book, build your vision of how Wi-Fi hacking works. I've given you the baseline and the tools to do so. Now you just need to slap on the correct layer of paint so that it portrays the Wi-Fi hacking you do. And a milestone I never had on my radar was when a fan approached me. I was like, dude, I love Sprawlrunners. I would like to publish a supplement for it. I was like, what? Sprawlrunners is a supplement. What are you talking about? Yeah, I want to build on that and publish a swag product that references Sprawlrunners and brings something more on it. And because it's not in there, but my group really likes Technomancers. And I wrote something for it and I think it should go on swag. So yeah, how about it? I'm like, cool, go ahead. Please insert this license text and link to Sprawlrunners. And that's how Magus Rogue published his first swag product, which is Technomancers, which is a supplement for a supplement, which is insane when I think about it, but is also really, really cool. And I think it is a really great window into the Savage Worlds creator community. Like, everybody builds of everybody. Like, Sprawlrunners builds on the Savage Worlds core rulebook, but I also have stuff I've taken from ideas from Titan Effects, and they have taken some of those same ideas from a product that is out of print, sadly, called Agents of Oblivion. And it's just a big circle of ideas, and everybody seems to be feeding off everyone else, which is a really, really, really great community to come into. It has a downside because so many people have been doing stuff for so long that if you come in and you have this awesome idea, then there's a good chance that people are going to tell you, oh yeah, that's been done in this way, check out this. And that can be disheartening, and it can feel super condescending. And I can only give you my word, it's not how we mean it. We just want to save you the time to reinvent the wheel, because a lot of stuff has been done already and tested and just works. So instead of just reinventing a cool mechanic, check if somebody has done it and then use that to do what you actually want to do. If you want to publish pure mechanics, then, well, okay, then you need to check if it's already been done and maybe find a way to make it unique for you. That's a whole different thing, and something I'm very keenly aware of, because I do not publish settings. I suck at writing settings. So that is why I do only mechanics.
Well, that was going to be my next question to you was, like, have you thought about layering some more lore and settings on top of Sprawlrunners to make it like a complete package?
Yes, I had. For Sprawlrunners, that was a non-issue. I never wanted any setting material in there, but ever since I've published it, people were like, cool, so when is the setting coming out for Sprawlrunners? And that led to some interesting developments and some problems. The interesting development was I got some offers, some really great offers. So at the moment, I'm busy writing an adaptation for Sprawlrunners for an official ACE setting, which it should be out. I think it's out. Stingers and Spores, in which you play insects in a world without humans. Humans have gone away, and you play literal sentient insects. It's a very, very small world with very, very interesting time frames, because insects perceive time different. It's awesome. The guy who does it is super knowledge. I think he works with insects. I forgot an entomologist, I think it is.
That's right, yeah.
And so yeah, he knows his insects, and it shows in the book, and it is just a love letter to insects in a fantasy world. It's great. And on a podcast I run with a friend, we reviewed Stingers and Spores, and I made a joke, like not really a throwaway joke, but I just made an off remark about, man, that would be so cool to have a future vision of that, just dial it forward 2,000 years and run this with Sprawlrunners. And my friend was like, yeah, we could call it Hive Runners. And I was like, oh, dude, that's amazing. And like 2 weeks later, I get an email. I was like, yeah, I listened to your podcast episode. Would you like to write that? Like, oh, what? I've had a lot of those moments over the past years. So yeah, we talked and talked it through and signed a contract. And yeah, I'm writing the official Sprawlrunner supplement for Stingers and Spores called Hive Runners, which will give you an overview of the history of the insect kingdoms a few thousand years into the future and how it all went to absolute shit, because that is what cyberpunk does. It makes everything go kaput and dirty and gritty and grimy, and provide rules updates and adaptations so people can use Stingers and Spores and combine it with Sprawlrunners to run insect cyberpunk adventures.
Wow.
So that is going to be the first official setting released for Sprawlrunners. So yeah. The first official setting for Sprawlrunners is not going to be my own, which I'm perfectly fine with. But yeah, a lot of people kept asking for an official Sprawlrunner setting. So I started gathering ideas, and it took ages because I may have mentioned I'm shit at writing settings and coming up with stuff that hasn't been done already. I'm really good at looking at stuff that's already there and then modifying it to do something it couldn't before, or in a different way, and show new approaches. So that is reflected in the mechanical products I release. Distant Journeys and Fast Lane Hacking, they don't do anything new. They just tell you how to use established systems in a certain new way that either hasn't been done before, or at least hasn't been publicly documented before. So the process of making or even coming up with initial ideas for my own setting took a long time, and I'm still not really that far. I think at this point I have species and half a page of loosely connected notes and a single plot point for the plot point campaign. The idea was to make running the Sprawl and then apply everything I write in the book and explain in the book by showing, okay, and this is how you would make a setting with it, and then just guide people through the creation of an example setting, which would then be the official Sprawlrunner setting, I guess, and use that and use a mini setting for it. So it wouldn't be a full setting book with 90 pages player's guide and 90 pages GM's guide. I wouldn't be able to do that. There's just no way. I hold everybody who can even write a 60-page setting book in the absolute highest possible regards. The creativity of those people, to me, is something I literally cannot comprehend, because I could never do it.
And there's probably people, though, that look at your skill set and go, I can't do that. And so it's nice to see that kind of partnership being able to happen. And it looks like, or sounds like, the community is really open to that in the Savage Worlds areas. And maybe, I guess we're heading to our close here, but where can people find you and the communities that you've been talking about as far as Savage Worlds and Sprawlrunners?
Well, the Savage Worlds communities you can find mostly on the official Savage Worlds Facebook group, and also on the unofficial Savage Worlds Discord server. I think both of them are linked on the Pinnacle Facebook page, but if not, just search for it. Just Google it. They're both really easy to find. I am on both of them, and I'm also in the Pinnacle forums. I'm on the Savage Worlds subreddit and a few other locations that I probably forgot right now. Veiled Fury Entertainment itself has a Facebook page, which I monitor, and I'm myself on Facebook, obviously. But the main hub of activity and interconnectivity and creativity happening around Sprawlrunners is happening on the official Veiled Fury Entertainment Discord server, which you probably should also Google or just go in the Veiled Fury Entertainment Facebook page and click the link there because, well, I'm not big enough to have a fancy invite link. It's still just upper and lowercase letters and numbers, sadly.
Well, I'll make sure all those links are in the show notes and the video description, and hopefully people can connect with you. And if maybe they have a setting that they want to pitch to you, and you can help them out and go from there. But I really want to say thank you for sharing so much of the behind the scenes work and what it takes to develop your products, because as you know, on our channel, there's probably a lot of aspiring designers, and even myself, I went, Savage Worlds to me is a very interesting game mechanics, but you kind of don't know where to enter into if you were ever going to use it in your own design. So it's very nice to have some expert advice for that. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. And yep, to anyone out there trying to get into the community and trying to get into the design space, it's easy, and it's a lot easier than you think as soon as you understand Savage Worlds, and that is not hard either.
Perfect. Well, once again, Manuel, thank you. Very much appreciated. Thank you.